Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the incredibly exciting world of Queen Victoria. No, really, try to stay awake. Imagine, for a moment, that you are whisked away, not to a grand ball or a thrilling adventure, but to a life so meticulously planned, so utterly constrained, that even your breakfast toast feels like a state affair. You're living in Kensington Palace, a child, surrounded by adults who seem less like family and more like ever-present shadows. Every move you make, every word you utter, is observed, noted, and critiqued. There's a constant, suffocating pressure to be perfect, to be royal, even before you understand what that truly means. You're not just a little girl, you are a future monarch, and frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the sheer, mind-numbing boredom of it all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. From the moment you, Princess Alexandrina Victoria, opened your eyes on May 24th, 1819, your life was less a childhood and more a carefully orchestrated performance. You are the only legitimate heir to the aging King William IV, and that means your existence is a matter of profound national importance. Your mother, the Duchess of Kent, and her comptroller, Sir John Conroy, have implemented what they call the Kensington system. Sounds fancy, right? It's basically a gilded cage. You're never, and I mean never, allowed to be alone. You share a bedroom with your mother until you're grown. Every lesson is supervised. Every walk in the garden is chaperoned. Privacy? What's privacy? It's a concept as foreign to you as, say, a quiet afternoon with a good book and no one silently judging your reading posture. Your education is comprehensive, focusing on languages, history, geography, and a dash of music and drawing. You become fluent in German, French, and Italian, which is impressive, but mostly it means you have more people to supervise your linguistic development. You're taught by a governess, Baroness Lezen, who becomes your closest confidant, almost a surrogate mother in a sea of formal interactions. She's the one person you can truly relax around, sharing whispered secrets and quiet moments away from the ever-watchful eyes of your mother and Conroy. Your days are structured with a rigidity that would make a drill sergeant nod in approval. Morning lessons, carefully supervised playtime, formal dinners, and then more lessons. Rinse and repeat, day after day, year after year. It's less about joyful discovery and more about dutiful absorption. One mainstream historical fact about your early life is the Kensington system itself. This incredibly strict upbringing was designed by your mother and Conroy to make you utterly dependent on them, hoping to secure their own positions of power when you eventually ascended to the throne. It essentially isolated you from other children and even from many adult members of the royal family. Historians still argue whether this isolation ultimately fostered your resilience and independence, or if it simply contributed to your early sense of loneliness and a deep distrust of those around you. It's not a fun way to grow up, let me tell you. Imagine never getting to just run wild, climb a tree, or even have a proper tantrum without someone documenting it for posterity. A quirky tidbit from this period is that your dolls, over 132 of them, were meticulously cataloged and often dressed in costumes depicting various historical figures or social types. You didn't just play with dolls. You used them to create elaborate, theatrical scenes, almost like a miniature, quiet rebellion against the controlled chaos of your real life. It was your one small outlet for creative expression in an otherwise highly regulated environment. You had a doll of every conceivable type, from grand ladies to humble servants, and you'd spend hours staging their lives, a silent, internal drama playing out while the real drama of your future awaited. You're constantly aware of your lineage, the weight of the crown looming closer with each passing year. Your grandfather, King George III, had been mad, and your uncles, the Prince Regents and King William IV, were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly models of decorum. The royal family's reputation had taken a beating, and you were seen as the great hope, the innocent vessel to restore dignity to the monarchy. No pressure, right? Just the entire future of the British Empire resting on your tiny, meticulously educated shoulders. You're taught to hold your head high, to speak clearly, and to always, Always remember your duty. It's exhausting, frankly, being a symbol before you've even mastered tying your own laces. You yearn for freedom, for just a moment of quiet solitude where you aren't being observed, where you can simply be. But that's a luxury denied to a future queen. One moment you're a tightly wound spring, wound by the diligent hands of the Kensington system, and the next, everything snaps into exhilarating, terrifying focus. You are 18 years old, just barely an adult by any measure, when your uncle, King William IV, breathes his last. It's early morning, June 20th, 1837. You're roused from your sleep at Kensington Palace by the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain, their faces grim, their voices hushed with the weight of the news. You are queen, just like that. No grand ceremony, no trumpets blaring, just two rather serious-looking gentlemen delivering the ultimate life update. Imagine waking up to that. No snooze button, no quiet contemplation over a cup of tea. Suddenly, the entire weight of an empire, the most powerful nation in the world, rests squarely on your shoulders. You, who have barely been allowed to walk down a corridor unsupervised, are now the ultimate authority. It's an immediate, jarring shift from suffocating constraint to absolute, albeit ceremonial, power. Your first act as queen is to hold your initial Privy Council meeting. You enter the room, a small figure in black, but with a surprising air of quiet authority that silences the murmuring lords and politicians gathered before you. They are testing you, perhaps expecting a nervous, overwhelmed girl. Instead, they find a monarch. You read your declaration, your voice clear and steady, declaring your humble but most fervent prayer to Almighty God that He will prosper my reign. It's a moment of truth, and you rise to it. This immediate transition from princess to queen is a mainstream historical fact that shocked many. The young Victoria, long seen as a pawn in her mother's schemes, suddenly displayed an unexpected maturity and resolve. Historians still argue whether this immediate self-possession was a genuine manifestation of your character or a carefully rehearsed performance, a product of your intense training. Regardless, it certainly impressed the seasoned politicians surrounding you. You were no longer just Alexandrina. You were Victoria, Regina. A quirky tidbit from this very first day is that after the Privy Council, you dismissed Sir John Conroy, your mother's controlling companion, with polite but firm dispatch. You made it clear he would have no further role in your affairs. This was a subtle but incredibly significant act of defiance, demonstrating your newfound independence and a clear break from the Kensington system. It was a mic drop moment, Victorian style, executed with a quiet dignity that belied the years of suppressed resentment. He thought he had you under his thumb, and you swiftly showed him who was truly in charge. Take that, Sir John. The sheer volume of immediate responsibilities is staggering. Every official document, every appointment, every decision now requires your signature, your assent. The constant stream of red boxes, overflowing with state papers, begins almost immediately. You're signing death warrants one moment, approving a new ambassador the next. It's a crash course in governance, a baptism by fire that would send most people screaming for the hills. But you, surprisingly, embrace it. There's a thrill in exercising your own will, in making your own decisions, free from the constant interference of your mother and Conroy. You've traded one kind of confinement for another, perhaps, but this one comes with a crown and a whole lot more say in how your own life, and the life of a nation, is run. Your coronation follows a year later, in June 1838, at Westminster Abbey. It's a grand spectacle, designed to impress and solidify your position in the public eye. You are dressed in the heaviest robes imaginable, sparkling with jewels, and the crown feels weighty on your head, not just physically, but symbolically. The ceremony is long, full of ancient rituals and solemn vows. You are anointed with holy oil, presented with the orb and scepter, and finally, the St. Edward's crown is placed upon your head. The cheers of the crowd outside the abbey are deafening, a roar of approval that echoes the hopes of a nation. It's overwhelming, exhilarating, and utterly exhausting. You're officially the queen, not just in title, but in the hearts and minds of your people. Though, let's be honest, you're probably just looking forward to taking off those incredibly heavy robes and having a nice lie down. The things they made you wear. It was a good thing corsets were in fashion, Otherwise, you might have just crumpled under the weight. With the crown firmly, and rather heavily, on your head, you quickly learn that being queen isn't just about parades and waving from balconies. It's about politics, and more specifically, it's about navigating the labyrinthine world of Parliament. As a young woman and a new monarch, you wisely understand you need guidance. Enter Lord Melbourne, the Whig Prime Minister, a charming, experienced, and rather worldly statesman who becomes your indispensable mentor. He's like the wise old wizard to your earnest young sorceress, if the sorceress was obsessed with constitutional monarchy and avoiding scandals. Melbourne is a fascinating character. He's been around the block, seen it all, and possesses a dry wit that appeals to your burgeoning sense of humor. He spends hours with you, not just discussing state affairs, but patiently explaining the nuances of British politics, the personalities of the various ministers, and the intricate dance between Crown and Parliament. You meet with him daily, sometimes twice a day, poring over dispatches, discussing policies, and learning the delicate art of reigning without directly ruling. He teaches you about the balance of power, the importance of public opinion, and how to remain above the partisan fray while still being an informed and influential figure. He becomes not just your political advisor, but a surrogate father figure, a comforting presence in a world that is still largely alien and overwhelming. This reliance on Lord Melbourne is a mainstream historical fact, illustrating how a young, inexperienced monarch learned the ropes of governance. His influence was profound, shaping your early understanding of constitutional monarchy. Historians still argue whether Melbourne's almost paternalistic guidance inadvertently delayed your full development as an independent political operator, or if it was precisely what you needed to navigate those crucial early years without major missteps. One thing's for sure, he certainly earned his keep. Imagine having a personal tutor for the job of running an entire country. A quirky tidbit from this period is the sheer volume of correspondence you maintain, even beyond state papers. You become an avid letter writer, filling pages with your observations, opinions, and even detailed critiques of parliamentary speeches. It's almost like a Victorian-era Twitter feed, but with much better penmanship and significantly more gravitas. Your letters reveal a sharp mind, a keen observational eye, and a developing political instinct. You're not just a figurehead, you're actively engaging with the issues, even if Melbourne is doing most of the heavy lifting initially. You develop a particular dislike for some politicians, like Sir Robert Peel, the Tory leader, primarily because he's a bit stiff and not nearly as charming as your beloved Melbourne. It's all very human, isn't it? Even queens have their favorites and their least favorites. The bedchamber crisis of 1839 is a prime example of your growing political assertiveness and your loyalty to Melbourne. The Whig government, led by Melbourne, was struggling, and he offered his resignation. You, still deeply reliant on him, reluctantly accepted and invited the Tory leader, Sir Robert Peel, to form a new government. However, Peel insisted that you dismiss some of your Whig ladies of the bedchamber, your personal attendants who were politically aligned with Melbourne. You, seeing this as an affront to your personal household and a move to undermine your political independence, famously refused. You declared that you would not consent to remove your ladies, who were your trusted friends. This led to Peel being unable to form a government, and much to your relief, Melbourne was recalled as Prime Minister. This incident, while seemingly minor, demonstrated your emerging will and a firm grasp of your prerogatives. It showed that while you trusted Melbourne, you were not simply a puppet. You had your own opinions and were willing to stand your ground, even against the most powerful politicians in the land. It also solidified your image as a strong-willed monarch, a young woman who, despite her youth, would not be easily pushed around. It was a clear signal that you understood the political game, and you weren't afraid to play. Though, to be fair, having Melbourne back probably meant less awkward small talk at dinner. While Lord Melbourne was busy teaching you the intricate dance of statecraft, a new player was about to enter your life, one who would change its course forever. You were still basking in the glow of your early reign, enjoying the freedom that came with being queen, even if it meant an endless stream of red boxes. But for all the political mentorship, there was a void in your personal life. That void was about to be filled by a handsome, earnest young man from Germany, your first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. The idea of marrying a cousin might sound a bit, old-fashioned to us now. But for European royalty, it was practically a family tradition, a way to maintain bloodlines and political alliances. You had met Albert briefly when you were 17, and you found him rather charming, if a little quiet. Your uncle, King Leopold I of Belgium, also Albert's uncle, because royal family trees are less like trees and more like very tangled bushes, was keen on the match. He saw the political advantages of aligning the British throne with his own German connections. And so, in October 1839, Albert, along with his elder brother Ernest, arrived in England for a visit. This visit was, in essence, an audition. You, as the reigning monarch, had the final say in your choice of husband. And from the moment you saw him again, you were smitten. He was tall, handsome, intelligent, and possessed a serious, thoughtful demeanor that contrasted with your own more vivacious nature. He also seemed genuinely interested in you, not just your crown, which was a refreshing change from the sycophants and fortune hunters who often surrounded you. You felt a connection, a sense of ease you rarely experienced with others. This immediate attraction and subsequent proposal is a mainstream historical fact, illustrating your personal agency in selecting your consort. A quirky tidbit from their courtship is that it was you who proposed to Albert, not the other way around. As the reigning monarch, it was considered improper for him to propose to you. So, 5 days after his arrival, you summoned him to your room, and, summoning all your courage, popped the question. Imagine the scene. The most powerful woman in the world, a young queen, asking her cousin for his hand in marriage. It must have been nerve-wracking for both of you. He, of course, accepted immediately, perhaps a little stunned, but certainly pleased. You later wrote in your diary that he was truly delightful, and described the proposal as the happiest moment of my life. Romantic, isn't it? Though probably not the kind of story you tell your grandchildren. Yes, darling, I summoned your grandfather and ordered him to marry me. However, not everyone was as thrilled as you were. Albert, despite his intelligence and good looks, was German, and the British public, still clinging to a healthy dose of xenophobia, wasn't entirely enthusiastic about a foreign prince consort. There were concerns about his influence, his religion, though he was Protestant, like you, and his general Germanness. Parliament even quibbled over his allowance, granting him less than you desired, which was a source of minor irritation for you. Historians still argue whether the initial public lukewarm reception to Albert stemmed from genuine anti-German sentiment or was simply a natural reaction to a foreign consort marrying into the highly insular British royal family. Either way, you were unwavering in your affection and belief in him. Albert, for his part, was keen to prove his worth. He was a man of science, art, and innovation, with a strong work ethic. He understood that his role would be a challenging one, to be your husband and advisor, but always in a subordinate position to the reigning monarch. He spent his early days in England trying to understand the peculiarities of British society and politics, often feeling frustrated by the perceived inefficiencies and resistance to change. He was a serious fellow, more interested in improving the sewage system than attending frivolous balls. You found this charming. Others sometimes found it a bit earnest. But for you, he was everything you had longed for, a partner, an intellectual equal, and someone who loved you for who you were, not just for what you represented. The stage was set for a truly transformative partnership, one that would redefine the role of the consort and, indeed, the monarchy itself. Your engagement to Albert was swift, and the wedding followed just a few months later, on February 10th, 1840, at the Chapel Royal, St. James's Palace. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a deeply symbolic union, intertwining your personal affections with the vast responsibilities of your throne. You famously wore a white satin gown trimmed with orange blossom, a choice that started a fashion trend that persists to this day. Before you, brides often wore colored dresses. Imagine you, the trendsetter of wedding fashion. It's a delightful, almost rebellious choice for a queen, highlighting your personal taste over rigid tradition. The marriage itself was, for you, a joyous affair. You were genuinely, deeply in love with Albert. He was everything you desired, intelligent, principled, and handsome. Your diaries from this period are full of effusive praise for him, detailing your happiness and contentment. You found in him a true partner, someone who understood the pressures of your position and yet offered a steadfast, loving presence. He, in turn, adored you, admiring your spirit and dedication. Their profound personal happiness in their marriage is a mainstream historical fact, often highlighted as a bedrock of your reign. However, the reality of a royal marriage, especially for a reigning queen, was far more complex than just personal bliss. There was the constant negotiation of power dynamics. You were the queen, the sovereign, while Albert was merely the prince consort. This presented an unprecedented challenge to traditional gender roles and royal protocol. He, as a man, was expected to be the head of the household, but you, as the monarch, were the ultimate authority. This led to subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, tensions and adjustments as you both found your footing in this unique partnership. Historians still argue whether Albert's eventual prominence was a natural evolution of his talents or a calculated usurpation of your initial authority, though you yourself empowered him considerably over time. A quirky tidbit that illustrates this dynamic is that while you were the monarch, it was Albert who took on the meticulous management of the royal household, from balancing the books to overseeing the staff. He brought a Germanic efficiency to proceedings, much to the initial bewilderment and sometimes irritation of the more laid-back British courtiers. He even redesigned aspects of Buckingham Palace, making it more practical and less drafty. Imagine being the queen and having your husband tell you how to arrange the furniture. But you genuinely appreciated his diligence and his desire to improve things, even if it meant a few raised eyebrows from the old guard. He once famously complained about the extravagance and waste at court, which for someone used to careful German principalities must have been quite a shock. He was probably thinking, good heavens, are they serving champagne to the stable boys again? Albert also quickly became your most trusted advisor, gradually taking on more and more political responsibilities. He delved into state papers, offered astute counsel, and championed various causes, particularly in education, science, and the arts. He was a champion of progress, constantly pushing for reforms and improvements. You learned to rely on his judgment, often deferring to his opinion on matters of state. This was a significant shift from your earlier reliance on Lord Melbourne, marking a new chapter in your development as a monarch. You discovered that a shared life could also mean a shared reign, even if the titles remained distinct. The challenges were not insignificant. Albert faced a constant struggle for recognition and respect from a British establishment that often viewed him as an outsider. He was sometimes perceived as stiff, humorless, and too serious for the frivolous court life. Yet, you fiercely defended him, always championing his intellect and his dedication. Your unwavering support was crucial in establishing his authority and in allowing him to carve out his influential role. You understood that his success was ultimately your success, and the stability of your reign depended on the strength of your partnership. Your marriage was not just a personal union. It was a strategic alliance that would profoundly shape the future of the British monarchy. And thankfully, it actually worked. What a relief, right? Imagine being stuck with someone you couldn't stand for the rest of your reign. The horror. With Albert by your side, your personal life began to blossom in ways the Kensington system had never allowed. And what does a happy, young royal couple do? They start a family, of course. Your marriage quickly led to the pitter-patter of tiny, royal feet, beginning with your first child, Victoria, also known as Vicky, born in November 1840, just 9 months after your wedding. Over the next 17 years, you would give birth to 8 more children: Albert Edward, Bertie, Alice, Alfred, Helena, Louise, Arthur, Leopold, and Beatrice. 9 children in total. Imagine the chaos, the noise, the sheer volume of baby bonnets and tiny shoes. It's a mainstream historical fact that your large family helped solidify the image of the monarchy as a moral and respectable institution, contrasting sharply with the rather scandalous personal lives of your Hanoverian predecessors. You found childbirth to be, shall we say, a rather unpleasant experience. You famously described it as this shadow side of our married life. You also struggled with the societal expectation of doting motherhood, often finding the constant demands of infants tiresome. While you loved your children deeply, especially as they grew older and became more like miniature adults capable of conversation, you preferred to delegate much of their day-to-day care to nurses and governesses. This was common practice among the aristocracy of the time, but it certainly doesn't fit our modern image of hands-on parenting. Historians still argue whether your sometimes detached approach to infant care was a result of the societal norms of the era, the physical toll of frequent pregnancies, or perhaps a lingering effect of your own emotionally distant upbringing. A quirky tidbit is that Albert took a keen interest in the upbringing and education of your children, far more so than you initially did. He designed a rigorous, intellectually demanding curriculum for them, particularly for your eldest son and heir, Bertie, who he hoped would be a model constitutional monarch. Bertie, however, was rather spirited and often struggled with the academic rigor, much to Albert's disappointment. There were many earnest discussions, likely followed by deep sighs from Albert, about Bertie's latest report card. Imagine your husband drawing up color-coded timetables for your toddler. It must have been quite something. He even tried to teach the children about efficient plumbing systems, which probably went down like a lead balloon with the little ones. The sheer frequency of your pregnancies, combined with the demands of state, meant you were often physically exhausted. Yet, you persevered. Each birth was an event of national significance, announced to the public with cannon salutes and church bells. The sight of your growing family reassured the nation of the stability and continuity of the monarchy. You and Albert also introduced the tradition of Christmas trees and Christmas carols to the wider British public, a German custom Albert brought with him, which, of course, became incredibly popular. So, you can thank Albert for those annual sing-alongs and the struggle to get all the lights untangled. Despite the joys of your growing family, the pressures of your dual role as mother and monarch were immense. You had to juggle official duties, state visits, and endless paperwork with the constant demands of a nursery overflowing with children. You sought to project an image of domestic bliss and moral rectitude, a stark contrast to the previous Hanoverian kings who had often been associated with scandal and dissipation. You and Albert created a new model of royal domesticity, one that emphasized family values and respectability, becoming a powerful symbol for the burgeoning Victorian middle class. This image of the ideal royal family helped to repair the monarchy's reputation and connect it more deeply with the aspirations of ordinary people. It was a lot of work, keeping up appearances, but it paid dividends in public opinion. You essentially became the royal family's first PR manager, alongside being the actual queen. Quite the resume builder. With a rapidly growing family and a relatively stable political landscape, you and Albert turned your attention to grander visions for Britain. And nothing quite encapsulated Albert's progressive spirit and your shared ambition more than the brainchild of your beloved husband, the Great Exhibition of 1851. This wasn't just a fancy fair. It was a global spectacle, a celebration of industry, technology, and art from around the world, designed to showcase Britain's industrial might and leadership. Imagine a colossal greenhouse, built entirely of glass and iron, shimmering in the London sun. That's the Crystal Palace, the magnificent temporary structure erected in Hyde Park for the event. The exhibition was Albert's passion project. He championed it tirelessly, overcoming considerable skepticism and opposition from politicians and the public who feared it would be a breeding ground for crime or even a site for revolutionary plots. You, however, supported him implicitly, understanding his vision and trusting his judgment. The sheer scale of the undertaking was unprecedented. Over 100,000 exhibits from around the globe, showcasing everything from steam engines and hydraulic presses to exquisite diamonds and intricate lacework. It was a sensory overload, a dizzying display of human ingenuity. The opening day, May 1st, 1851, saw you, Albert, and your children arrive in a grand procession, greeted by enormous crowds and booming cannon fire. This monumental event and your role in its opening are a mainstream historical fact, often cited as a symbol of mid-Victorian optimism and industrial prowess. A quirky tidbit from the exhibition is that among the thousands of exhibits, there were some truly bizarre and wonderful inventions. You could see everything from a massive chunk of Canadian copper or in a working envelope machine to a mechanical lady who could write and draw. Perhaps most amusingly, some exhibitors tried to pass off utterly mundane items as extraordinary. It was a free-for-all of innovation and, occasionally, pure promotional genius. Imagine wandering through halls filled with gleaming machinery, exotic plants, and even a taxidermied polar bear, all while dodging curious crowds. It was probably the closest thing to a modern-day World's Fair or a giant tech expo, but with more top hats and fewer fidget spinners. The Great Exhibition was an astonishing success, attracting over 6 million visitors over its 5-month run, a staggering number considering the population and travel difficulties of the time. People from all walks of life, from the highest aristocracy to ordinary working families, flocked to the Crystal Palace. Special excursion trains were even organized to bring people from across the country. It was a truly democratic event, demonstrating the accessibility of progress and culture to a wider public. The exhibition was also remarkably profitable, generating a surplus that was used to establish major cultural institutions like the South Kensington Museum, now the Victoria and Albert Museum, among others, the Natural History Museum, and the Science Museum. This foresight, largely attributed to Albert, cemented a lasting legacy of public education and cultural enrichment. Historians still argue whether the Great Exhibition was primarily a celebration of British industrial supremacy or a more globalist vision, promoting international cooperation and peace through trade and cultural exchange. Albert certainly envisioned it as the latter, a grand testament to human progress that transcended national boundaries. You, too, shared his enthusiasm for its unifying potential. It was a powerful statement to the world that Britain, under your reign, was a force for progress and innovation, not just military might. For you, it was a moment of immense pride in Albert. His dedication, his meticulous planning, and his unwavering belief in the project had paid off spectacularly. The success of the exhibition elevated his standing in the public eye, finally earning him the widespread respect and admiration he had long sought. It was a powerful testament to your partnership, showcasing not just British achievements, but the growing influence and effective collaboration between you and your beloved Prince Consort. You were both beaming, and rightly so. It truly was a monumental undertaking, and one that cemented your reign as one of progress and ambition. As the industrial engine of Britain roared on, fueled by the innovations celebrated at the Great Exhibition, your empire was simultaneously undergoing a colossal expansion. This wasn't just about little islands anymore. This was about vast swathes of the globe coming under the Union Jack. From the scorching deserts of Africa to the bustling markets of India, British influence, trade, and ultimately, control were stretching across continents. You, as queen, were at the apex of this immense, sprawling dominion, though much of the actual day-to-day administration was handled by Parliament and the Colonial Office. The sun, as they famously said, truly never set on your empire. This period of rapid imperial expansion is a mainstream historical fact, defining much of the 19th century and shaping global geopolitics for generations. The motivations were complex: economic gain, strategic advantage, the spread of British culture and governance, and for some, a genuine belief in a civilizing mission. You, personally, saw the empire as a source of national pride and strength, embodying Britain's global prestige. You were particularly fascinated by India, even learning a few words of Hindustani and keeping Indian servants at court. Imagine dinner parties at Buckingham Palace with attendees from every corner of the world, a testament to your global reach. The expansion often came at a significant human cost, involving conflicts, annexations, and the imposition of British rule on diverse peoples. The Opium Wars in China, for instance, forced open Chinese markets to British goods, including opium, leading to widespread addiction and social disruption. The scramble for Africa saw European powers carving up the continent, often with little regard for existing indigenous societies or boundaries. While you, as queen, were not directly orchestrating these policies, you were the symbolic head of the empire carrying them out. Historians still argue whether the economic benefits of empire outweighed its moral and human costs, a debate that continues to resonate today. A quirky tidbit is your fascination with exotic pets and plants brought back from various corners of the empire. At Windsor, you had zebras, elephants, and even a kangaroo in your private menagerie. Imagine taking a stroll through the palace grounds and encountering a wallaby. These creatures were symbols of the far-flung reach of your empire, living embodiments of the diverse lands under your rule. They were also probably a royal headache for the palace groundskeepers, right, who left the elephant trumpeting outside the drawing room window again. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, was a particularly brutal and traumatic event for the empire, deeply affecting you. It began as a mutiny among Indian soldiers, sepoys, against British rule, fueled by grievances over religious insensitivity and perceived injustices. The rebellion quickly spread, leading to widespread violence and atrocities on both sides. The British response was swift and merciless. Following the suppression of the rebellion, the British East India Company, which had governed India for centuries, was abolished, and direct rule was transferred to the British Crown. This meant that from 1858 onwards, you were proclaimed Empress of India, a title you cherished and one that elevated your symbolic status even further. Becoming Empress was a significant moment for you, adding another layer to your already impressive list of titles. It solidified your position as the ruler of millions across the subcontinent, reinforcing Britain's imperial might. You began to take a more personal interest in India, advocating for better governance and welfare for its people, though the realities on the ground were often far more complex and harsh. The empire, while a source of immense wealth and power, was also a constant source of moral and political dilemmas, hinting at the vast, complex challenges that lay ahead for both your reign and the world. You might have been the empress, but it was a whole lot of people to keep track of, all with their own cultures and needs. It certainly wasn't as simple as just signing a document and expecting everyone to fall in line. Even a reign as illustrious as yours, Queen Victoria, was not immune to the crushing weight of personal tragedy. While the empire expanded and industry boomed, your private world was repeatedly touched by grief, reminding you that even a monarch is ultimately human, vulnerable to loss. The stability and happiness you had found with Albert and in your growing family would be tested by the inevitable sorrow that comes with a long life. These profound personal losses are a mainstream historical fact, often overlooked amidst the grandeur of your public life, yet they shaped you deeply. The first major blow came relatively early in your married life with the death of your mother, the Duchess of Kent, in March 1861. Despite your often strained relationship during your childhood under the Kensington system, you had reconciled in later years, and her passing left a void. You mourned her deeply, reflecting on her love and devotion. But this sorrow, profound as it was, paled in comparison to the cataclysmic event that followed just 9 months later. December 14th, 1861, a date that would forever be etched in your memory as the day the sun went out. Your beloved Albert, the steadfast, brilliant, and utterly indispensable partner of your life and reign, succumbed to what was diagnosed as typhoid fever. He was only 42 years old. The shock was immediate, the grief overwhelming, and your world, as you knew it, shattered into a million pieces. You were utterly devastated, plunged into a profound, almost incapacitating depression. The man who had been your husband, your lover, your closest friend, and your most trusted advisor was gone. Just like that. This sudden and devastating loss of Prince Albert is a critical mainstream historical fact, marking a turning point in your personal life and, arguably, in your reign. Historians still argue whether Albert's death was indeed due to typhoid fever or if it was complicated by other underlying conditions, perhaps even stomach cancer, given his reported symptoms and later medical interpretations. What is undeniable, however, is the profound impact his death had on you. For years, you had relied on him for everything, from political counsel to emotional support. His absence left an immense void, and you felt completely adrift. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates your profound grief is your insistence that Albert's rooms at Windsor Castle be maintained exactly as he left them for decades after his death. Fresh water was placed in his basin, and his clothes laid out daily, as if he might return at any moment. It was a poignant, almost haunting, ritual, a tangible manifestation of your inability to let go of his presence. Imagine walking past those rooms, knowing they were kept in perpetual readiness for a ghost. It's both incredibly sad and a little bit unsettling. Your grief was not just personal, it was public. You entered a state of deep mourning that would last for the rest of your life. You wore black for the remaining 4 decades of your reign, earning you the moniker the Widow of Windsor. You withdrew significantly from public life, preferring the solitude of your beloved Balmoral Castle in Scotland or Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, rather than the bustling formality of London. Your public appearances became rare, leading to some criticism and public grumbling about the Invisible Queen. The loss of Albert was a blow not only to you, but also to the stability of the monarchy. He had been a tireless advocate for reform and progress, and his death left a significant vacuum in political and social initiatives. You felt the weight of continuing your duties without his guiding hand, often questioning your own ability to reign alone. This period of intense mourning marked a profound shift, transforming you from the vibrant young queen into a somber, almost reclusive figure, forever marked by the indelible pain of losing your soulmate. The vibrant spirit that had once filled Kensington Palace and charmed Lord Melbourne was now shrouded in perpetual black. It was a terrible, terrible blow, one that you would never truly recover from. The years following Albert's death were, for you, a prolonged twilight. You retreated into the shadows of your grief, becoming, as the public soon christened you, the Widow of Windsor. Your deep mourning was not merely a private sorrow. It became a defining characteristic of your reign for decades. You shunned London, Buckingham Palace, and the formal court life you had once embraced, preferring the quiet solitude of Osborne House on the Isle of Wight or your beloved Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. The vibrant young queen who had charmed a nation was now a reclusive figure, perpetually clad in black, a stark symbol of personal loss. This extended period of withdrawal from public life is a mainstream historical fact, causing significant public concern and even resentment. Cartoons of the era depicted you as a perpetually veiled, isolated figure. Questions began to be asked about the monarchy's relevance if its head was rarely seen. Parliament debated your prolonged absence, and Republican sentiments, though still fringe, began to gain a little more traction. The nation, which had adored its young queen, now felt neglected by its grieving monarch. Historians still argue whether your prolonged withdrawal was a necessary period of healing that ultimately strengthened your resolve, or if it risked permanent damage to the monarchy's public standing. A quirky tidbit from this period of intense mourning is your profound reliance on John Brown, a Scottish gillie, gamekeeper, from Balmoral. He became your devoted personal attendant, constant companion, and unofficial confidant. Their relationship was unusually close, leading to much gossip and speculation, with some even whispering about a secret marriage. He was gruff, plain-spoken, and utterly devoted to you, providing a level of informal comfort and straightforward honesty that few others dared. He would sometimes even speak to you more directly than any minister, which must have been quite a shock for anyone used to rigid royal protocol. Imagine being the queen and having a servant tell you to buck up, or similar. It was certainly not standard operating procedure. Your reclusiveness meant that many ceremonial duties and state functions were curtailed or simply not performed. Public appearances, once a regular feature of your calendar, became rare events, often met with immense public anticipation simply because they were so infrequent. You continued to engage with state papers, the constant flow of red boxes never ceasing, but your direct interaction with ministers and public life was significantly reduced. Albert had been the driving force behind many progressive initiatives, and his absence left a noticeable void in public policy and patronage of the arts and sciences. However, even in your grief, you retained a strong sense of duty. You understood, intellectually at least, the importance of the monarchy to the stability of the nation. It was a slow, arduous process, but gradually, incrementally, you began to emerge from the deepest shadows of your mourning. Your children, particularly your eldest daughter Vicky, and your prime ministers, particularly Benjamin Disraeli, gently encouraged you to return to public view. They recognized that the monarchy's connection with the people needed to be re-established. The weight of the crown, which you had so eagerly taken up as a young woman, now felt heavier than ever, burdened by grief. Yet, beneath the perpetual black attire and solemn demeanor, the resolve of the queen who had dismissed Conroy and stood firm in the bedchamber crisis still flickered. The process of re-engagement would be gradual, punctuated by moments of intense emotion and a reluctant acceptance that duty, however painful, still called. You were no longer the carefree young queen, nor the vibrant partner of Albert. You were the venerable, sorrowful matriarch, and the nation watched, waited, and wondered if their queen would ever truly return. The answer, as it turned out, was yes, but in a different, more somber guise. The path back to public life, for you, was a long, winding, and often reluctant one. After years shrouded in deepest black and the quietude of your private residences, the demands of the throne, coupled with the persistent nudges from your ministers, slowly began to pull you back into the light. This gradual return to duty and public engagement is a mainstream historical fact, signaling a crucial phase in your reign where you transition from the reclusive widow to a more visible, albeit still somber, symbol of the nation. Your recovery wasn't a sudden burst of energy, but a series of incremental steps. The persistent urging of your prime ministers, particularly Benjamin Disraeli, played a significant role. Disraeli, with his flamboyant personality and keen understanding of public relations, recognized the need to revive the monarchy's image. He flattered you, appealed to your sense of duty, and understood that even a grieving queen could be a powerful national symbol. He would write you letters filled with flowery prose, praising your wisdom and emphasizing the nation's need for your presence. You, perhaps, rolled your eyes a little, but you also listened. One of the turning points was the passing of the Royal Titles Act in 1876, which formally proclaimed you Empress of India. Disraeli, ever the showman, knew this grand title would appeal to your sense of imperial pride and give you a new focus. It certainly did. The title resonated with you, adding a majestic flourish to your existing role and drawing you back into the affairs of that vast, distant jewel in your crown. It felt like a new purpose, a different kind of connection to your millions of subjects. A quirky tidbit from this slow emergence is your increasing reliance on Indian servants, particularly Abdul Karim, who became known as the Munshi, teacher. You learned Hindustani from him, wrote to him daily, and even gave him a prominent position in your household, much to the consternation and outrage of many of your courtiers who found his rapid ascent scandalous. Imagine the whispers in the palace corridors. This personal connection to India reflected your growing interest in the empire and gave you a unique, personal window into a culture far removed from your aristocratic British bubble. It was a clear sign that you were beginning to embrace the diversity of your empire, albeit on your own terms. Historians still argue whether your renewed public presence was a genuine resurgence of interest in state affairs or largely a performative act driven by political necessity and Disraeli's shrewd management. Regardless, your increased visibility was undeniable. You began to attend more public functions, albeit often briefly and still dressed in your customary black. You performed investitures, opened hospitals, and visited regiments. Each appearance was met with enthusiasm from the public, eager to see their queen again. The image of the monarchy was slowly being restored, moving away from the invisible queen moniker. You found new ways to connect with your subjects, particularly through your compassionate interest in social welfare and the armed forces. You visited wounded soldiers, showing a maternal concern that resonated deeply with the public. You became the embodiment of national stability and tradition in a rapidly changing world. The grim, unapproachable figure of earlier years began to soften, replaced by the image of a venerable matriarch, still sorrowful, but now also deeply dedicated to her people. This return wasn't about erasing the memory of Albert, far from it. His presence, his legacy, was still woven into the fabric of your daily life and your reign. But you were learning to carry on, to rule, not just for him, but for the millions who depended on the stability of your throne. You had been broken, but you were not shattered. And slowly, painstakingly, you began to piece yourself back together, emerging as a monarch who, despite personal tragedy, still possessed an unwavering sense of duty. The weight of the crown was still there, but now, perhaps, you felt strong enough to bear it, even alone. Having slowly, almost reluctantly, re-engaged with public life, your reign entered a new phase, one marked by magnificent celebrations that underscored your longevity and the unwavering stability of the British monarchy. These were your jubilees, grand national festivals that served as powerful affirmations of your reign and the empire you symbolized. They were not just parties. They were meticulously planned spectacles designed to project an image of enduring power and widespread affection for the crown. The first major celebration was your Golden Jubilee in 1887, marking 50 years on the throne. This was a truly monumental occasion, a stark contrast to the quiet, private life you had led for so many years after Albert's death. The streets of London were thronged with cheering crowds, eager to catch a glimpse of their queen. Princes and representatives from across your vast empire gathered, a colorful testament to Britain's global reach. You, dressed not in somber black, but in a magnificent gown adorned with the Kohinoor diamond, rode in a grand procession to Westminster Abbey for a Thanksgiving service. This public spectacle and the outpouring of national pride are a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating the monarchy's enduring popularity. A quirky tidbit from the Golden Jubilee is that among the dignitaries present were 50 foreign kings and princes, creating a truly remarkable display of international diplomacy and royal solidarity. Imagine the logistical nightmare of seating arrangements and protocol for that dinner party. It was a veritable who's who of global royalty, all come to pay homage to the Empress of India. It must have been quite the scene, a dazzling array of uniforms, jewels, and assorted facial hair. You, meanwhile, probably just wanted a nice cup of tea and to sit down. The Jubilee wasn't just confined to London. Across the empire, celebrations took place, from parades in Calcutta to fireworks displays in Sydney. It was a moment of collective introspection and national pride, a chance for people to reflect on the immense changes that had occurred during your half-century on the throne, the advent of railways, telegraphs, photography, and vast social reforms. Historians still argue whether these Jubilee celebrations genuinely reflected popular support for the monarchy or were largely orchestrated displays of imperial power designed to reinforce social hierarchies. Regardless, the public turnout and enthusiasm were undeniable. 10 years later, in 1897, you celebrated your Diamond Jubilee, commemorating 60 years as Queen, an unprecedented milestone for any British monarch at that point. This celebration was even grander than the Golden Jubilee, deliberately designed to emphasize the strength and unity of the British Empire. The procession through London was a truly astonishing sight, featuring troops from every corner of your dominion. Turbaned Sikhs, Zouaves from West Africa, Highlanders from Canada, and many more, all marching in a breathtaking display of imperial might. You yourself, now 78 years old and somewhat frail, rode in an open carriage, smiling and waving to the adoring crowds. This second Jubilee solidified your image as the venerable matriarch of the empire, the living embodiment of an era. The celebrations were not just for you. They were for the empire itself, a demonstration of its power and its unity under your benign gaze. You had become more than just a queen. You were a national institution, a comforting constant in a world of rapid change. Your presence, aged and frail as you were, radiated a quiet strength, a testament to decades of unwavering duty. The cheers of the crowds, though perhaps less frenzied than in your younger days, carried a deeper resonance, a profound respect for the woman who had guided them through so much. It was a remarkable testament to your resilience and the enduring power of the crown. And finally, you got to wear some color again, even if it was still mostly black under the sparkle. As your reign progressed into its later decades, you evolved from a grieving widow into a revered, almost mythical, matriarchal figure. Your longevity, combined with the sheer scope of the changes witnessed during your time on the throne, transformed you into a living symbol of an entire era. You were no longer just the queen. You were the grandmother of Europe, your numerous children and grandchildren marrying into almost every major royal house on the continent, effectively weaving a vast dynastic web across the aristocracy of Europe. This extensive familial network is a mainstream historical fact, showcasing your profound personal influence on European politics through strategic marriages. By this point, the world was hurtling forward at an astonishing pace. The advent of electricity, motor cars, telephones, and motion pictures began to revolutionize daily life, even if you, personally, preferred the comforts and rhythms of a slightly earlier era. You were a bridge between the old world and the new, a constant in a sea of rapid change. Though you had embraced some modern conveniences, like the telegraph for state communications, you retained a fondness for traditional ways, perhaps finding comfort in their familiarity amidst the dizzying pace of progress. Imagine explaining the internet to someone who still used a quill and ink for official documents. It would be quite the conversation. A quirky tidbit from your later life is your enduring love for animals, especially dogs. You had a succession of beloved pets, particularly Pomeranians, which you often brought with you on official engagements. Your dog, Dash, was your faithful companion in your youth, and in your later years, a white Pomeranian named Turi became a constant presence, often sleeping on your bed. You even had a special dog cart for your pets, driven by a footman. Imagine a monarch conducting official business with a small, fluffy dog peeking out from under her arm. It adds a certain charm, doesn't it? It certainly humanizes the formidable empress. While you had delegated much of the political heavy lifting to your prime ministers, particularly Gladstone and Disraeli, you remained an informed and influential figure behind the scenes. Your experience was immense, your judgment often shrewd, and your moral authority significant. You were a sounding board, a source of wisdom, and occasionally, a formidable obstacle to policies you disliked. Your famous rivalry with William Gladstone, characterized by his earnest, moralizing tone often clashing with your more pragmatic and imperialistic leanings, is legendary. Historians still argue whether your interventions in politics were appropriate for a constitutional monarch or if they occasionally overstepped the boundaries of your ceremonial role. You became a symbol of national unity and moral rectitude, embodying the values of hard work, duty, and family that were so celebrated in Victorian society. The image of the grandmother of Europe fostered a sense of stability and continuity in a continent prone to political upheavals. When you celebrated your Diamond Jubilee in 1897, the public adoration was immense, a testament not just to your long reign, but to the deep affection you had cultivated over the decades. You were the nation's constant, a reassuring presence in an ever-changing world. Even as old age brought its inevitable frailties, your sense of duty remained unwavering. You continued to receive state papers, hold audiences, and perform your royal duties with remarkable fortitude. You understood the immense symbolic power you wielded and the importance of maintaining the dignity of the crown. You had seen generations come and go, witnessed revolutions and transformations, and through it all, you had remained on the throne, a testament to your resilience and the enduring power of the monarchy you embodied. You were, simply put, an institution. While your later life saw you revered as a symbol of stability and imperial grandeur, the very empire over which you presided was not without its darker complexities and growing criticisms. Beneath the pomp and pageantry of the Jubilees, the vastness of your dominion presented immense challenges, ethical dilemmas, and growing discontent, both abroad and at home. This inherent tension between imperial glory and its less savory realities is a mainstream historical fact that historians continue to grapple with. The expansion of the British Empire, while a source of national pride, was often achieved through force, exploitation, and the imposition of British rule and culture on diverse indigenous populations. The Boer Wars in South Africa, for instance, which dragged on for years at the very end of your reign, exposed the brutal realities of colonial conquest, leading to widespread suffering and international condemnation of British tactics, particularly the use of concentration camps. Imagine the grim headlines, even in your carefully filtered newspapers, about the loss of life and the immense cost of these distant conflicts. It certainly wasn't all parades and tea parties. Moreover, the economic benefits of empire often flowed primarily back to Britain, enriching the metropole at the expense of its colonies. Resources were extracted, local industries were sometimes suppressed to favor British manufacturers, and political power was concentrated in London. While proponents argued for this civilizing mission, bringing British law, education, and infrastructure to less developed nations, critics pointed to the destruction of local cultures, the suppression of indigenous rights, and the creation of deep-seated resentments that would fester for decades. Historians still argue whether the long-term impact of British imperialism was primarily beneficial in terms of modernization and global integration, or overwhelmingly detrimental due to exploitation and the perpetuation of inequality. A quirky tidbit that reflects the vastness and occasional absurdity of imperial administration is the creation of various obscure colonial posts and titles. You were, after all, Empress of India, but also the nominal ruler of places like the Kingdom of Sarawak, where a series of white Rajas, British adventurers, ruled with almost absolute power, a strange anomaly within the formal empire. Imagine someone arriving at court, dressed in exotic local garb, claiming to be the ruler of a jungle kingdom far, far away. It truly was a world of bewildering diversity under your ultimate, if symbolic, command. At home, there was growing social unrest and a questioning of the established order. The rise of organized labor, the burgeoning suffragette movement advocating for women's right to vote, and increasing demands for social welfare reforms all challenged the status quo. While you maintained a public image of unwavering stability, you were keenly aware of these shifting tides. The industrial boom, while creating immense wealth, also led to Dickensian poverty in urban centers, vast inequalities, and often appalling working conditions. Your government, and indeed your own conscience, grappled with these immense social issues. The complexities of the empire, with its vast geographical spread and diverse populations, presented a constant administrative challenge. Decisions made in London had profound ripple effects across continents, and the sheer volume of information and requests that crossed your desk daily was immense. While you relied heavily on your ministers, the ultimate responsibility for the welfare of millions, from Canada to Australia, from South Africa to India, rested, at least symbolically, with you. You were a figurehead, yes, but a deeply significant one, whose very presence legitimized the sprawling enterprise. It was a heavy crown, indeed, weighed down not just by jewels, but by the myriad hopes, fears, and struggles of a quarter of the world's population. Your remarkable reign, spanning 63 years and 7 months, finally drew to a close on January 22, 1901, at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. You were 81 years old, and had lived long enough to witness the dawn of a new century, a transition from the world you knew to one filled with incredible new technologies and profound social shifts. Your death, though long anticipated given your age, plunged the nation and indeed much of the world into mourning. It marked not just the end of a monarch's life, but the closing of an entire epoch, the Victorian era. This conclusion of your reign and the defining of an entire historical period around it is a mainstream historical fact, fundamentally shaping our understanding of the 19th century. The Victorian era is synonymous with industrial progress, imperial expansion, social reform, and a distinct set of moral values emphasizing duty, respectability, and earnestness. It was a time of immense change, and you, as its enduring figurehead, became intrinsically linked to its triumphs and its complexities. You were, quite simply, the face of a rapidly modernizing world. Your funeral was a grand, somber affair, reflecting both your personal wishes and your imperial status. You had left detailed instructions for a military funeral rather than a state funeral, desiring a white coffin with your military cape and medals. This final act reflected your deep respect for the armed forces and a personal preference for simplicity, despite the pomp that had often surrounded your life. The sight of your horse-drawn gun carriage, followed by kings and emperors from across Europe, was a powerful visual testament to your immense influence and the interwoven destiny of European monarchies. A quirky tidbit from your final days, revealing your enduring affection for your loyal attendants, is that at your explicit instruction, your favorite Pomeranian, Turi, was placed on your deathbed, and John Brown's personal tartan cape was placed in your coffin. These small, intimate details offer a poignant glimpse into your private sentiments, a humanizing touch to the grand narrative of your reign. They were small comforts, carried with you into the stillness. Historians still argue whether the Victorian era truly ended with your death, or if its social and cultural characteristics stretched further into the Edwardian period. What is undeniable, however, is the profound psychological shift that occurred. Your successor, your son Edward VII, ushered in a new, less rigid era, but the foundations you had laid, the precedents you had set, and the image of the monarchy you had so meticulously cultivated endured. You had successfully navigated the crown through periods of immense social and political upheaval, cementing its place as a stable, unifying force in a constitutional democracy. Your legacy is vast and multifaceted. You presided over an empire that encompassed a quarter of the world's population, saw unprecedented technological advancements, and witnessed profound social changes. You reshaped the image of the monarchy, transforming it from a scandal-ridden institution into a respectable symbol of national identity and family values. You were a woman who, despite the immense weight of duty and personal tragedy, ruled with a deep sense of commitment and an often surprisingly strong will. The era that bears your name was a time of contradictions, immense wealth alongside grinding poverty, technological marvels paired with social conservatism, and global power alongside the seeds of future conflict. You, Queen Victoria, were at the heart of it all, a constant presence through decades of tumultuous change. Your reign was a tapestry woven with threads of personal joy and sorrow, political triumphs and challenges, all against the backdrop of a nation transforming itself and the world. You left an indelible mark, not just on Britain, but on the very fabric of modern history. Your story, though long and sometimes boringly dutiful, was, in its own quiet way, truly extraordinary. And now, as the grand narrative of your incredible life as Queen Victoria draws to a close, let the echoes of the horse-drawn carriages and the distant cheers of the Jubilee crowds begin to fade. Feel the weight of the crown lift from your brow, the heavy silks of your gowns soften into the comforting embrace of your blankets. The grand palaces, the bustling streets of London, the far-flung outposts of a vast empire, they all recede, becoming whispers in the quiet of the night. The worries of state, the intricate dances of politics, the relentless demands of duty gently slip away. Let the images drift like soft clouds across your mind, dissolving into the peaceful darkness. The long, dutiful reign is over, the historical facts settled, the quirky details chuckled over. All that remains is the gentle quiet. Allow your thoughts to slow, your breath to deepen, and your body to relax completely. Drift now, with the gentle current of sleep, into a peaceful and undisturbed slumber. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.